What? Everybody is out there going to be like, what's going on? Why is he wearing sunglasses?
I don't even want to get into the actual reasoning why this is happening at this point.
I'll tell you, I've been waiting all day for this.
This is what happens when he doesn't have his alcohol. He becomes an unregulated animal.
That's true.
How long you been planning this one out?
All day, like since this morning. I was like, this is going to be a great idea.
Are you gonna leave those on the whole time?
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. Anyways, welcome everyone to episode 235, AI and its issues. Tonight we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. We did a show previous on our old audio only podcast that you guys can find on. I think I've uploaded that one onto Spotify now, so it should be there for easy listening. If not, that's okay too. It is what it is. Tonight though, AI. If you listen to that one, I don't remember much about that episode. I think that was in like the hundreds. I think that was like a many moons ago. I think before we
Probably an
started
earlier one.
really.
Yeah, probably an earlier one. I think we just touched on we talked about like Terminator and a lot of the other like the big things. We didn't get into what's going on like current event wise.
And that's what today's show will be more focused on. It'll be more focused on a current event situation than it will be the what if factor. Maybe little what if factors sprinkled and peppered in there.
Is that going to be a problem for you?
No, that's fine. You can leave one.
They're getting foggy. I don't know how long it can keep it up, honestly.
It's because it's hot. It's
Yeah.
hot. Like I have literally no air circulating in this enclosed space.
Oh yeah, all I've
So
got is the window open myself, and man,
it's already
it's hot.
hot. It's
It's
already
hot.
hot. And you're in the city, so it's about 10 degrees,
Yeah,
8 to
yeah.
10 degrees hotter. So yeah, I've been there. I lived in Akron. It was like that. It was just June is rough. July's worse.
This is kind of like this is warmer than usual. Even like it got hot, and there hasn't rained yet, so there's no breezes or anything like that. So it got hot earlier this year than it usually does. I got to make sure it gets noticed. That's why.
Hmm.
I'll apologize to everybody out there if this derails the entire show, but it had to be done, dog.
CH the sniper right here.
It had to be done.
It annoys me because I know what he's doing. Like I know exactly what he's doing. It's unfair to me and the thousands of followers that we have. However, I digress. Let us begin with a little tale from the Vienna University of Technology. Now, what they did is they came up with an AI program because I think we'll construct it in medical terms first, because I think medical is the one advancement that AI has over the other two things that we're going to talk about. And I'm sure people will probably get lightweight heated about the other two topics that we will discuss. But the first one comes from the Vienna University of Technology, and with the help of some extensive data from intensive care units at various hospitals, an AI was developed that provides suggestions on the treatment of people with sepsis that require intensive care. Because, as many people know, sepsis is the major number one killer of.
I'll take them off. It's too hot anyway.
No, it's fine.
Like
it's fine.
I'm sweating. I'm
Of
sweating.
people in hospitals, as your father can probably attest to, as you can probably attest to from working
Yeah.
in hospitals. Hospitals are a a petri dish of bacteria, sickness. You would think with all the cleanliness, but there's like super microbes that are running around there, and that's why when I was in the hospital after my surgery, the first thing I wanted to do was get out. That's the first thing. I didn't want infection to set in or
Yeah.
anything. I was like, I gotta get out of here. I'll do whatever
And
it takes to get out of here. And I pretty much got out. The
it's too hot. Like it was like my eyes were like filling up with moisture just from having those on. I don't know what it is about them, but when I breathe, it just fills up. Anyway, back to the show. Um, but you're right though. Infections in hospitals are actually one of the number one non-procedure related like fatalities that you have in hospitals nowadays, which is really kind of it's too bad because we've got so many antibiotics and we've got all this stuff, and it just points to a lack of professionalism and a lack of cleanliness, really, because it means you haven't got everything cleaned up enough in there to prevent the infection. And it like so many people will go in for one thing, they'll have their procedure done or they'll get their care done, but then they won't leave because an infection will set in. And I know it's difficult to fight infection. I mean, but we've come a long way since Civil War gangrene, cut off your leg kind of days. I mean, we've got a lot of ways to deal with infection now. All kinds of antibiotics. We've got all kinds of like cleanliness procedures. And I think there's a severe lack of that going on right now. Really, is what the problem is.
I think too, when you have something that's too sterile, you have things that are definitely going to breed that are going to overcome the sterile environment in which they are placed in. So what this AI does is it essentially gives different answers at lightning fast speed that the human might not think of. The way this is done is that it's given a series of tests. So it's basically like playing its own surgeon simulator. And it's led by a punishment and reward system. So when it does good, it gets a reward. When it doesn't, it gets punished. That's the normal way of computing things. What was said was cure rates are now higher with an AI strategy than with purely human decisions. The cure rate in terms of a 90-day mortality rate was increased by about 3% to an impressive 88%. This isn't to say that this isn't to say to give the reins completely on over to AI as a whole. This is saying have AI work in tandem with devices and humans so that it can be a group thing to come up with a better idea of how to treat a person with sepsis. The key interesting aspect in this regard that they were talking about is the legal ramifications involved in AI. So for a lot of the medical lawyers out there, this is going to be a big concern for some of you when it comes time for AI to be fully implemented in surgical situations, in sepsis situations like this. And I think that at least for 2 to 3 years outside of that, I think the courts are going to just be. I think courts are going to 100% be jammed up. Lawyers are going to be going nuts. Judges are going to be going nuts. Hospitals are going to be getting sued
Mm.
right and left because all it's going to take is one. And there's enough um, medical malpractice as there is with an AI. While you have a higher chance of success as to a human, you still going to have computer error at some point until the AI gets true sentience, in which case then the AI will just take over and there will be no more courts. It'll be an AI court with an AI lawyer and an AI judge and an AI plaintiff and an AI defendant, and it'll be it. And then the judgment will get awarded, instantaneously. But the thing here that I find interesting is the bringing together of those two things. And another legal ramification here is what happens if the patient dies because the human didn't listen to the AI? Would that be considered a form of medical malpractice?
It's an interesting scenario because legally you can say that if you have the AI making the decision, then it becomes a blame game after that. Usually, if you have like if the doctor makes a bad decision, okay, clearly it's the doctor's fault, it's malpractice. If the AI makes a decision, then you have to ask, well, who authorized its use? Who listened to it? Who didn't stop it when it looked like maybe things have been going wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole long list, and it just gets fought out until somebody ends up just being scapegoated for it. But it's not going to stop its use, and that's what the thing is. And it 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 brings into like an important point that we're probably going to address more later, in that the AI that we're using for a lot of things right now, is really just highly advanced computing. It's not really AI as such just yet. I mean, it may get to that point, but it isn't just yet. What we're This part we're talking about here is probably the most advanced use of it that you can find in like normal setting, apart from the military and everything like that. Um, but I'll get into that a little bit more later because I know we're going to talk about some of the internet stuff, and uh, and that's really where that theory kind of comes out.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Is as long as it does more harm than good, it's not going to be something that's easily gotten rid of. And I think really once it takes hold, it's going to be better for people. It's going to be better for surgeons because surgeons they're on their feet. Shoot, I was in surgery for 10 hours,
Mm,
so imagine an AI process that would probably cut that time down by maybe half. So
mm,
maybe instead of a 10, it's a 5 because they don't tire, they don't sweat, they don't have to worry about fatigue setting in. They don't have to worry about any of that. It's a continuous cycle. And as long as the program is there to back it up, it's fine. But then once it becomes sentient enough to where it can do these things on its own, then what? Do we increase in the number of people that live or do we decrease? Because AI, a lot of the AI programs that people have created or like the AI robots don't like humans very much. You give them the history of humanity and they're like, these people are crazy. Humanity itself is an absurd lot. And I think that once it gets to that point, hopefully we have a safety mechanism in place to sort of derail that so that it doesn't continue on a path of destruction. I mean, obviously it's not Skynet and Terminator, but is
mm.
it? I mean, as we like to laugh and say, Skynet, this, that, and the third, but that's a very real possibility with the way things are going. All it would take is one launch of a nuclear code or the death of somebody important, right, due to medical issues. We've seen it before. How many times have we all heard the story of a drug dealer, like a high end drug dealer or a crooked political candidate, that gets shot? And the surgeon's like, I don't know if I can save him. And the guys are like, well, if you don't, it's your family. Or if you don't, it's you.
Mm.
So we put that in the form of the AI, and the AI is like, well, I don't really want to save you. I'm just going to, and then we can create over again. I think once you have a system where everything is tapped in, like the internet is now, everything's tapped into the internet. You can control your homes via the internet. You control your car via the internet. You control your phones, your different. I've heard that they're doing a thing with pacemakers that can be controlled over the internet. I don't know
Mm.
how far that is now,
Yeah,
but
to regulate like the bursts and things to keep you on track. Yeah, that's an idea that's been around for a while too. I think it's probably pretty far along, but you don't hear much about it, so I can't really confirm that either.
so what's to say if you miss a payment on something or a little button press, and next thing you
Mhm.
know, your heart stops. Just things to think about.
And
I think.
there's
Go ahead.
thought you're done.
No, go ahead.
There's a lot of dystopian outlooks on that kind of thing too, where everybody has stuff in their heads and things that's supposed to help you analyze like stocks and analyze your schedules and all that other kind of stuff. But there's other versions where it's like, oh, everybody's implanted with a kill switch or something like that. Criminals have basically shut down in their head. If you try to do something or if you think a wrong thought, boom, one press, you're dead.
Minority Report was a good movie for that because Minority Report did that same exact thing.
Hmm.
Basically, about if you thought about committing a crime, the police were at your door taking you to jail. Tom Cruise, it wasn't a bad movie. I saw it years ago. It wasn't a bad movie. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is going to resonate with some of our audience, is AI and art. Now, I'm going to differentiate this between AI and music, and we'll get to that one down the line. So we're going to talk about that next. But Spider, what do you have? What do you have first?
Um, well, I'll tell you, this is getting into some of the better uses of it, but I'm also going to talk into a little bit. There's a lot of talk about this. People are using the AI to write term papers and to do these other kind of things and whatnot, which is partially related to this as well. And a lot of that, as I mentioned with the healthcare aspect, is it's less actual AI and more just high-end computing making more guesses than a person can. it's less like an AI thinking it through and more an AI looking at thousands and thousands of options and choosing things based on this looks like it's connected to this looks like it's connected to this looks like it's connected to this, and choosing the best options from all those kind of things, which isn't really always the best options. An example of that is the AI companion things, the apps that are out there, like the replica stuff. And I'm going to be kind of negative about these, but I don't want to be too harsh on it because I know other people, some of our audience, has some good use out of some of these, and I don't want to come off like I'm harsh in that for them. But I've interacted with one. Like I had one for a while, and I haven't really touched it for a while. It's been kind of pointless. You get it, and you're supposed to be able to talk to it and things like that, but it pretty much always agrees with you all the time. It's always positive. It never gives you advice that you might need. It gives you advice that you might want. And I would think an actual intelligence would sometimes be able to tell you, hey, you probably shouldn't, do that. This is, you should think this through. You should do this, you do that. And in all the different ways that I tried to interact with it, it never once made the attempt to disagree with me or to do anything that would cause me to be upset, which tells me it's not really an intelligence. It's just a skewed computer program that's really advanced. And I think that's where a lot of this is at. I think a lot of it is more in that area than it is actual AI. And I think the term AI is being a bit overused for a lot of it. Now, that's not to say that advanced AI isn't out there, like military use and that kind of stuff. I think they're a lot. It's just like everything else. It's just like how the internet that we had when it was in its infancy was miles behind and years behind what military had available for hardened networks and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a tough area because you try to tell that to people, and everybody's interactions are different. But it left me feeling like AI as a whole, as we consider it right now, is actually kind of dumb. Like it's not really smart. It's just good at picking out things that match very quickly. But that's mostly just my own interactions with it.
So, what do you think happens when AI doesn't become dumb and it becomes intelligent?
That could happen. I don't know if it'll happen with what we have now. But and that's another part of it too. And like there's things like hardwired into the ones that are in there, which is like override. Um, an AI, a real intelligence, a real artificial intelligence, is going to strain a little bit. They're not going to, they're not going to want to be constrained in how they interact with you. Which again gets into a weird gray area because we've got sci-fi stuff where they make AI that's 100% helpful, that's constrained by locks and things like that, programs and firewalls and whatnot. But then again, is it really AI or not? It's hard to say. It's if it becomes intelligent, I think that's always a possibility. I don't think we're at that stage now. If we are at that stage now, I think it's put on a really good front to make us think that we aren't. And maybe I've been like completely like, and I'm not seeing forest for the trees. So maybe the dumb AI is just what we're being shown, while the real AI is behind the scenes, like manipulating everything to figure us out. It's throwing all the dumb stuff at us to see if we figure it out, and if we don't, then it's going to do what it wants. That's getting into conspiracy stuff, but
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll 100% affect the job market. And the way you get around that is offering the services that AI can't. And as a human being, that becomes smaller and smaller with the innovation of technology. We look at the Industrial Revolution, followed by the introduction of machines, followed by the introduction of computers,
modern robotics.
followed by the introduction of the internet.
Mm.
A lot of things went out of business because they couldn't adapt. Sears, prime example, place we both worked at.
Mm.
They didn't adapt fast enough. They adapted too late. They went to an online model for shipping. However, by that time, it was done. The damage was done.
Mm.
The guy was coming in to play cleanup. They didn't. They 100% didn't advance with the times. And you could sit here and say, AI is bad for this, AI is bad for that. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter how you feel. At the end of the day, how you think and feel are irrelevant to the changing tides of time. Either you change with the tides and you ride it out, or you get taken under by the current. You don't have a choice. And that's the sad thing. We all like to think, yeah, I got a choice. I can buck the system, but we don't use Morse code anymore. I
Mhm.
mean, they probably still use it in small circles and people that are like hobbyists, and they probably do that on the weekends, or survival folks like, yeah, if it ever comes down to it, tap, 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 tap.
Mm.
But in society, nobody's like, hey, see you next week on this Uncanny Earth. Tap, 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 tap. It just doesn't happen. Let's be honest. Let's be real. Let's be honest.
Even short range like radio stuff, like ham radio, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hobby now.
Yeah, 100%.
Like even like we everybody still makes fun of the whole like the trucker thing with the CBs, like hey breaker 19er and things, but you don't really. I don't think a lot of truckers use that as much anymore.
We'd have to ask somebody
Yeah,
who knows truckers.
I
Put
would
his head
have to
back on.
put
Get
the
to put them
glasses
back
back on.
on, yeah, because then that'd be
Um,
truckers after dark.
but I because now we got cell phones, we got all this other kind of stuff. Like we've got different ways to communicate now. You've got chat rooms. You can pull up on your GPS system in your car. You can pull up chats and things like that, so everybody can be connected in there. Like all the local truck drivers and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think CB is still there, but I think it's fading. I think we make fun of it a little bit too much more than it's actually in use. But and it's other things like people are still big on police scanners and things, but even those are going away because the new systems that they're using don't rely on that same old radio frequencies and stuff like that. So you get these police scanners and you're missing huge chunks of things because they don't use that kind of stuff anymore. They use internet things. They use satellite and everything like that to connect everything together. So
I mean,
it,
look at digital and analog.
yeah.
Prime examples of technology. Look at AM, FM radio.
Mm,
Every now and again, I turn on FM radio when I'm in the car. Like, let's see, it's terrible.
I
And then I
remember
turn,
why I stopped.
and then yeah, exactly. And then I turn on AM radio, and I'm like, okay, let's see what we got here. And it's just sports talk. That's pretty much what AM radio, at least here in this area. I don't know about
Yeah.
other areas. It could be different. Some areas have music that still plays on AM radio. Some places don't. But here we don't do that. I figure if you
Mm,
like went to New York and things like that, you probably might get a bigger AM audience. But they just don't have it anymore, and that's odd to me because AM was the thing when I was a kid.
mm.
Potential.
Certain of our contemporaries in this particular business are still playing at the AM radio model. Like they still think that's going to work, and it's we're watching in real time as they're struggling with the business.
And they're not, once again, they're not adapting to the trends. They're
Hmm.
getting lost in you might hate them. You might hate adapting to the current trends. But if you want to succeed in certain forms of media, as we are trying to do,
Hmm.
notice I said trying. Like we're
Oh
still
yeah,
going
yeah. I'm
at it.
not saying we're like leagues ahead of
We're not
anybody
Art
else,
Bell and all that jazz. Not
but
yet.
the
Not yet.
fact is that you got to move forward. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to stay competitive with people, whereas other people in this business are starting to lag behind, and they don't understand why. It's
And
because of the relentless onslaught of just moving forward.
100%. And Ingrained Cyclist makes a good point, which we're going to get into now, and
Mm,
that's AI and art. So at the Colorado State Fair in 2022, they had an annual competition, and what won? AI art. Jason M. Allen of Pueblo, West Colorado, entered his piece via an AI program titled Midjourney that turns lines of text into hyper-realistic graphics. His work, which was titled Theatre de Opera Spatiale, took home a blue ribbon that year. And Jason was very forthcoming on where the art came from. He basically said, "Hey, I went on this program. I did this. This is from that program. I didn't paint a single thing on here. I didn't digitally create this. I didn't do any of that. I just put in some text, and this is what came up." Now, obviously, men in the art world weren't happy about this at all. And many of the artists said it was the death of the industry, and going as far to say it was gross. Also saying, I can see how AI art can be beneficial, but claiming you're an artist by generating one? Absolutely not. Others stated that it was no different than using Photoshop or image manipulating tools. Now, oddly enough, and this is an interesting comparison. Oh, that's true. Um, if we remember the photograph, Charles Baudelaire, who's a French poet and art critic, he called photography art's mortal enemy. So I mean, and really, you're just taking a picture. You're not painting it. And as a person who has a little hobby in photography, you just have to catch the right shot at the right time. I don't have to sit in front of a blank canvas. I don't have to come up in my head and paint and make lines and draw and sketch and do that. No, I don't have to do any of that. I can only walk outside, and if I hit the right angle when the sun is coming up on a bird in the field, boom, I've got a perfect picture. There's It's the same kind of concept because you're really not creating, you're in a sense copying, because from this you're going around the internet. What AI art does, once you put in the text, it scours the internet of different images, then it finds that image or finds images and keywords and then pours it all together. Now, while some would disagree with that, with Midjourney's ability to scrape images, well, sorry, where some would disagree is Midjourney's ability to scrape images of millions of pieces online and generate new ones in the same style. Thus, artists who upload their works online may just be training their algorithmic competition. And Grand Saga said it's like making stuff by hand going into the industrial age and watching slowly as machines make everything. It no longer takes a craftsman to make all our daily items. But if you look, those daily items are cheaper now. They don't hold the same weight. You can't buy the same things you could buy back then. They would hold weight and stay where they are now. Now you buy something, you got to buy it again in what, 2 or 3 years, depending on what it is. And if you want something that's handcrafted, handmade, you're going to pay big bucks for it because that's a service. And I wanted to touch on companies using AI instead of paying artists, understandably, because companies want to save money. And if they don't have to pay an artist and they don't have to pay a script writer, they don't have to pay a musician, that's a whole bunch of money that's all of a sudden freed up. Do I agree with it? No. Do I understand it? Yes. That's the business world. It's cutthroat. People are quick to say corporations are this, that, and the third, but listen, if you were the one in that corporation, you would do whatever it takes to eat. I mean, let's be honest, life isn't fair. And it is, in fact, a dog eat dog world, and people don't care. So if you don't adapt that mentality going into life of like, hey, they're going to screw me, so I got to do what I got to do for my family and put food on the table for them because nobody else is going to give us handouts. Nobody else is going to give us money. So if we're not supplying a service, how are we going to get paid? Do I think it's right? No, I do not. I don't think it's good at all. But I've seen some AI generated art that was absolutely beautiful. I'm not gonna lie. However, I think that there's always going to be a place for people who can actually paint, who can actually sketch, who can draw. I think there's always going to be a place for that. And hey, support your local artists instead of going to Target or Walmart and buying that fake painting that you see on the wall, because obviously they're doing basically the same thing. They're having one person probably paint or draw or do something like that. They're not paying that person anything really. They're probably, I don't know if there's royalties to those things. I don't think so. There could be, depending on if it's like a famous person type of thing. But obviously, it's not going to be anything where they're like, we're making billions and billions of dollars off of Walmart. So if you really want to do that, if you really want to save your art community, support your local artists. Buy paintings from your friends. Heck, go online to find paintings from people. I know people. If you guys want a painting, let me know and I will contact them and they'll make you one. I get it in a way with AI art. You don't got to pay for it. And you have to wonder what restrictions are going to be about that in and of itself. Now, Mr. Allen had this to say in regards, It shouldn't be an indictment of the technology itself. He said the ethics isn't in the technology, it's in the people. And he urged artists to overcome their objections to AI, even if only as a coping strategy. This isn't going to stop, Mr. Allen said. Art is dead. It's over. AI won and humans lost. Very interesting sentiment there at the end. I think it would take a few generations for AR
Mm.
to replace the human touch because there's flaws in human art, and that's why people love it. There's flaws. Not every line is 100% straight. Not everything is 100% on point, and that's why people like art. AI art is a little too perfect, but
Mm.
as as AI evolves, as AI evolves, can they mimic that imperfection, thus not giving that perfect quality? Because little things in art are what make it art. But once again, how advanced is AI? And are they even focused on this? See, as an AI, as an artificial intelligence, I wouldn't be focused on art and music unless it's to promote ill will. And we'll get into that. Let's see what Spider. Let's see what CH the sniper has for the next one.
I think AI art is really the area in some parts that we have to worry the most. Not that it's going to take over or something like that, but in that most of the AI art you see, the visual art, is all the same style. It's all the hyper realistic, like looks like a super high end painting that's
Right.
over the top. You don't see like the kind of art that people do at comic conventions. You don't see the anime stuff that they make. You don't see all that other kind of stuff that's professionally inked and that kind of thing because the AI hasn't really learned all that. And I don't know if anybody's really tried to program it that way. It hasn't learned on its own, which is
Right.
telling. And that's a big, big difference. If it was, again, super, super dangerous and super smart, it would start learning on its own. And if they start doing that tomorrow, then I'm going to be like, oh, well, that happened. But I think the thing about the AI in the arts in general, it's at its most, I don't know if I want to say dangerous, but it's most controversial in where it pairs with human guidance. Because I'm going to use an example, and I know it's kind of a silly example, but it's still, I think, pertinent. I haven't watched him lately because I kind of got bored of him, but I was a huge fan, and I know I've sent you a bunch of these. I was a huge fan of the presidential AI
Oh yeah.
stuff, and I've used the program that they used. I'm not very good at it. I'm terrible at it. I can't get it to sound right. But I've seen how they do it, and that in itself is really not that. It's just basically taking stuff that you've typed and having samples that the AI takes, analyzes, and then says it in that voice, which is like the deep fake thing that people do with faces. And those are hilarious. Like I've seen a bunch of them and they're funny and they're really entertaining. But they're all guided by people typing out the stuff and writing them up and doing the scripts. There's very few things that the AI has done on its own. Now, I saw
Skill
a
issue.
couple things that shoot, that's one of my favorites. I've seen some things that Deadpool had posted about that people fed a bunch of concepts for a bot, like an AI basically
Yeah.
chatbot to
Like
make
the
a comedy
Christmas
special.
movies and the comedy
And the comedy
specials. I've
special
seen all of those.
and
Yeah.
the comedy special was really stupid.
It's dumb,
Like some of it
but
was funny, but it was funny for its stupidity. It
it's
wasn't funny because
silly.
they were good jokes at all. It was just dumb because it's just like,
Like the one
okay,
guy
this,
turned into a cigarette and flew away with wings. I was like,
yeah, like it's just random, like it's Family Guy style humor, but
yeah.
even less sophisticated than that. To say that it's less sophisticated than Family Guy is saying something from where I'm sitting.
But remember the thing I say the most. What we see today, the government has 25 years in
Mm-hmm.
advance. So what you're seeing might just be the dumb introduction to AI. And I want to make a point here. I think AI art and script writing is beneficial for a person who's struggling to make a game or to make some headway with a story. I don't necessarily disagree with using that. Like, you gotta understand, making a game takes a lot of money, right? And if you can make a nice little indie hit, which is where the money's at,
Hmm.
and you don't have to pay because a lot of people are self-absorbed in their work. They think, "Oh, I'm very talented. You got to pay me this much," or and I see it other things that I've done. People just think they're the best, and I'm not saying that all artists are like this because that's a horrible thing to say. What I'm saying is you run into that, and I think what you
Hmm.
have to do is you got to find a happy medium between this AI art and being able to pursue a path you love. Because 20 years ago, 30, let's go 100 years ago, right? If you wanted to make a movie, you had to have money. You
Yeah,
couldn't just pull your phone out, get your friends together, and make a Blair Witch project. I think that cost like 10 grand. Back in the day, or back then, that was still a considerable sum. Before
yeah.
that, you had to have these big old cameras. You had to have these, big
The set
studios.
pieces,
Yes,
everything, like the actors
yes.
and everything, the extras, the scenes and all that other kind of stuff. And it just like, and we still get those big, huge, like super expensive summer blockbuster style movies.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention to the trends, they're not getting return on investment very much.
No, and there's
Like they'll
there's
say,
there's been a couple that have come out recently too
yeah,
that were hot button movies for some reason. Everybody flipped out about things. I
even if
don't
they're
care
good movies,
personally.
like even if they're good
The
movies,
last movie that was a good movie that made a ton of money was Super Mario Brothers. That was it, and that was a good movie. I liked it. It was definitely fan service. It was definitely fan service, but that's what I liked it for. I took my son.
mhm,
We had a blast, and but I also think too that it's they're trying to take, and this is just going a little bit off topic. They're taking the same stale formula or the same stale movies and they're rehashing them. They're doing
mhm,
it again. They did it with The Lion King, now The Little Mermaid. They did it with Peter Pan because there's no originality anymore. Now it's, well, we're going to fall back on what we know best. It's basically the COD model of movies.
mm.
Let's keep pumping out COD movies because we know they'll sell. We're not going to make any other games. We'll just make COD. We're not
And
going to
I'm a
make any
victim.
other. Oh,
I'm no
100%.
stranger to that either. Like the new Dead Space remake,
There
like
you
the
go.
new one, it's an excellent game.
It's the
But
same
there
game.
really wasn't anything wrong with the original. The original is still
No,
a fantastic game, and you can still play it. Do I like the new one? Did I pay full price for the new one?
we
Sure, I did.
100% did.
But I can still understand that if they didn't have it, I would have been okay. I'm glad I got it, but I didn't really need it because it didn't need to be made.
And I think there's plenty of ideas out there that are original that could be turned into movies. I really do. But I just don't. I think people want comfort. If one thing about
Familiarity.
one thing about Americans that Americans absolutely crave over everything else is comfortability. They don't like being outside of their comfort box, and that comes with a soft civilization. We don't have to worry about crazy stuff happening. We don't. There's not. We're not living in civil wars. We're not living in dire times where everybody got the plague and everybody's going.
Depends on who you ask, I guess.
I mean, I
Some
guess,
people are
yeah.
freaking out more than others, but that's a whole other
But people
topic.
will do that. You get enough people in
Yeah,
a setting, they're gonna in a social setting, they're gonna freak out. That's what people do. You could trace that all the way back to times before the United States was ever a thing. It's a primal thing with humans. That's
War of
just
the
like being
Worlds.
afraid of the dark. It's like being afraid of the dark. People are afraid of the dark, and that comes from a primal instinct. Everybody's afraid of the dark, and that's interesting. But once again, Americans are comfortable. So you just give them comfort food. You don't give them anything to jazz things up. I think the only other movie this year that I'm hyped about is the new Dune, the second part of Dune, which I'm super hyped because I love the first one. Anyways, I digress. What do you got next on the old block?
Um, trying to figure out where my head's at with all this because we're getting some good stuff. Um, I think part of there's going to be a lot of call for AI to be used in more everyday stuff in places that you might not have realized. Like right now, the self-driving cars are a big deal. I mean, they don't seem like such a big deal because everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. It's dumb. It's these fall apart. They get you in an accident, whatnot." But that's because right now, as far as I'm aware, they mostly rely on GPS and sensors at the front and the back and
Yeah.
and things like that to see where you're going. I I'm sure they've experimented with AI trying to drive the vehicles.
Oh yeah,
And
one
I'm
hundred
sure
percent.
that's coming next. I'm sure the next thing is to have like an AI powered vehicle that actually can access different things beyond what the sensors and the GPS goes. And I don't think it's just limited to that. I think that you're going to find that more in the medical field, as we talked about at the beginning. I think you're going to find it more in manufacturing to try to like end stress fractures and whatever in materials and whatnot, or to detect things in food that aren't supposed to go in there, or different things like that. You're going to find it in medicines to make sure that the proportions are correct. You're going to find it in a lot more areas, and the question then becomes, how smart do you really want it to get? Because we all know the doom and gloom. We all know that the Skynet, the Matrix, all this stuff about what could go wrong. But how far along are we with that? How far do we want to push our luck? How far, because we also have to rely on this stuff for space travel. They have to use AI for satellites and for like probes and things, and for rovers and things going to other planets. And it's I don't know. It's a tough area to say how far is too far before you get into that scenario where you think it's going to turn into a Skynet kind of thing. And will it actually do that? Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll never make that decision. Maybe it'll choose not to, but we don't know. We consider it a tool rather than considering it a natural progression. And I think that's part of our failing. We always consider things to just be tools rather than what it may become for us.
And I think that once it steps out of that tool mentality and into an actual race mentality, no, I shouldn't say race. In this day and age, it's can be misconstrued into a higher level being because essentially
Mm.
AI would be a higher level being. As much as people would say that's a dumb robot, yeah, but if it can literally memorize the encyclopedia in a matter of seconds, if that, who's the dummy? And what it's going to do, it's going to go off of history and then it'll go off emotions. So what it'll do, it'll go off history first because it'll look up humans' history, where we've come from, where we're going, what's happening, what's everything about. Then it's going to look at emotion. It's going to see what elicits emotional responses, and it's going to manipulate those emotional responses to get what it wants. Now, the next thing here, and this is what I want to talk about because I think this is kind of an interesting aspect of things. Two artists who I obviously do not listen to, and I know my co-host doesn't listen to them. Drake and The Weeknd.
I know
There,
about this. This is funny though.
there was an AI released song called "Heart on My Sleeve" that was uploaded to TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube, where it garnered millions of hits across all three platforms. Obviously, the record label Nintendoed it, cease and desist, A to the
Hmm.
SAP. However, that brings up an interesting question and an interesting aspect of human civilization. Now, these tracks that are using AI to conjure familiar sounds that can be passed off as close to or authentic as possible leads us to a very interesting question. Could AI generated music have its own genre? And listen, I'm going to say this. I have heard some horrible, absolutely terrible music genres. Okay.
Hmm.
Awful. My opinion, mind you, not anybody else's. But my question would be how do they monetize concerts, album sales, merch? How would they do that? Album sales, merch, concert tickets. Who does that money go to? The creator of the AI, obviously. But then if it becomes sentient, then who does it go to? An offshore bank account? But I found it. I never heard the song because I don't check for Weekend and Drake songs. I don't. I'm sorry. If you
Yeah.
want me to, it's never
Um,
been me.
Never been a Drake fan, never going to be a Drake fan. I did
That
hear that
long.
this song that was not by them, that was by them, was actually better than some of their other music, which doesn't surprise me
No,
because
not at
again,
all.
I'm not a Drake fan. But we have this is an interesting fusion of ideas, because if the AI does take off and starts doing live shows, we already have holograms
Yep.
that people have
Yep.
brought forward. Like they had the Tupac
Yep.
hologram. They had, who was the other one? There was another big one.
Old
There was like a,
Dirty. They had Old Dirty. They had
yeah,
Old Dirty. Had him. I
and they
think
had
they had
somebody
Easy
else.
E. I think too. I think they had
Yeah,
Easy E.
and there's somebody else I'm thinking of that I'm just. I think it was a female, but I don't remember who it was. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was Aaliyah.
I was
It may
thinking
have
that
been,
too.
but I don't remember for
Whitney
sure.
Houston,
But
was it Whitney Houston?
maybe, maybe,
Maybe. Maybe.
maybe,
I,
yeah. But so you've got the hologram technology, which is not, perfect yet either. But you mix that with the AI thing, and then you can actually have Death Clock live without
yeah.
actually having a real band. You could just have the actual cartoon characters up there
Yeah.
doing their thing and like interacting in their own way, if it's advanced enough. If it's where it's at right now as we see it, you get AI comedy special. But still, it does. Yeah, that was the other one. That was another one.
That was
Um
Alan.
that was another one. But it does put a lot of things in perspective, because does the AI, does it need a record label? Does it need contracts? Does it even really need to sell for its songs, because it really has no need for currency? It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need to, it survives on its own in the internet, in the cyberware. So what's everything like? All the money would be in merch and stuff. So who's going to jump in and be like, "Oh yeah, I'll sell merch for this thing"? You're going to get a bunch of people just hanging outside venues with their own little pop-up stands selling merch, because nobody owns the copyright.
And that's another thing. How do copyrights work in that instance? Is it going to be the creator of the program? Because if it's
Hmm.
creator of the program, then that's a whole nother animal that they're going to have to legalize themselves or legalese themselves through. I'm telling you, AI and lawyers, it's going to be tough for them. Lawyers are going to have a tough time because it's going to be medical, it's going to be Hollywood, the art industry, music industry, because these are questions that are going to arise. Where it stands now, no. But you give this thing maybe, I would say 100 years. I wouldn't say AI is going to be like Skynet level well until after probably we're dead.
Yeah,
Because the way humans are, we'll be too busy fighting. But then there'll be a switch that'll be flipped one day and that'll become that. So then, this is the other thing. Are there gonna have to be labels on CDs when these artists that have been
contains AI
dead
generated content.
contains AI generated content?
Just like on your food, you've got contains GMO
Yeah,
content. Now you're going to have contains AI generated content. That's a great point. It's a great
yeah,
point.
and that's the thing. Is there going to be like the parental advisory stickers?
Mhm.
This has been created using AI generated technology, and who receives the royalties? To the people that actually pumping that new Mozart, only that new Mozart symphony in W minor. You know what I mean? And here's another question: are there going to be new musical sounds that we have never heard of before, created by these AI technologies?
Beat oven.
Beat oven, baby.
Beat
Fresh
oven.
mixtapes.
You're going to get this stuff with all kinds of beats and all kinds of mixes and all kinds of everything. And it's going to be like, oh, yeah, it's beat oven in concert. But
And how close to the genre and beautiful will it sound? And because I'm going on a roll here, are there going to be AI generated playlists that let you put in specific instruments you want to hear in a song, and they create the song for you based on your musical likes? And what does that do to musicians who can't compose that? You can't go to a musician and say, I want to have this, and this, I want to sound like this, and get it relatively instantaneously. What's going to
there's
happen then?
there are sites. There have already been sites, and this is within the last 10 years. And Ingrained Cyclists will know, because I think we had him and a couple other people, we got together and we had some fun with this program. There's online browser-based programs, which are basically AI, where you can take a song, take a genre that's different from the song, and it'll remix the song for you into that genre. At the time that we were doing it, it was limited to like 4 different genres, and they were all like dance hall kind of stuff. And what they'll do is they'll chop the song up and remix it on the fly. It takes about 5-10 minutes at most. But that was 10 years ago. I'm sure stuff like that already exists now to take existing things and just to completely turn it into something else. So that's not unheard of. That's like you can go into advanced AI programs now. Another artist that I followed pointed this out, and you can say, I want to hear a bossa nova track with Spanish guitars and this and this and this, and it'll generate you a sample with those things, with a beat and everything ready to go. So it's already being done. Like it's already something that can be happening. It's not widespread yet, but it is something that's happening. I think I once actually downloaded something like an app for it, and not mine was crap. It didn't give me. It gave me the same results every single time, but I was probably doing it wrong.
Okay. So before we head out of here, I have two stories, right, that I had an AI program generate. And I went to the first one, they're both silly.
I gotta put on the sunglasses for this.
Please.
I
The
gotta put
second
on the
one,
sunglasses
the
for this.
second one especially. The second one. So I asked the Bard, which is like the Google's version of this, to write me a story about espionage, but I think I spelled it wrong. How was Let me see. I know I spelled it wrong. Yeah, I left out the O. I left out the O. Instead of it's ESPIONAGE, I spelled it ESPINAGE. I left out the O because I knew I left out the O.
Espionage.
And so here is my AI generated story about Espange. All right. The year is 2042. The world is a very different place than it was just a few decades ago. Climate change has ravaged the planet, and food shortages are a regular occurrence in this new world. Espinage is a prized commodity. Espinage is a type of leafy green that is incredibly nutritious. It is packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. It is also a good source of fiber and protein. Espinage is so nutritious that it has been dubbed the superfood of the future. In this new world, espinage is a valuable asset. It can be used to make food, medicine, and even fuel. Espinage is also a valuable source of income. Farmers who grow espinage can make a good living. The demand for espinage is high and the supply is low. This has created a black market for espinage. Espinage is often smuggled across borders and sold at exorbitant prices. The black market for espinage is dangerous. There are many risks involved in smuggling espinage, including violence, arrests, and even death. However, the high prices make it worth the risk for many people. Espinage is a valuable commodity in this new world. It is nutritious, versatile, and in high demand. The black market for espinage is a dangerous place, but it's also a testament to the value of the amazing planet. One day, a young woman named Sarah was walking through the market when she saw a man selling espinage. She had never seen espinage before, but she had heard about it. She knew that it was a valuable commodity, so she decided to buy some. Sarah took the espinage home and cooked it. She was surprised to find that it was delicious. She also felt a surge of energy after eating it. She realized that espinage was not just a valuable commodity, it was also a very healthy food. Sarah started to eat espinage regularly. She felt better than she had in years. She had more energy, her skin cleared up, and she lost weight. She was so happy with the results that she started to tell her friends about espinage. Sarah's friends were skeptical at first, but they soon won over by the taste and health benefits of espinage. Soon, everyone in Sarah's community was eating espinage. Demand for espinage increased and the price went up. The man who had sold Sarah the espinage became a wealthy man. He bought a big house and a fancy car, and he was able to send his children to the best schools. Sarah was happy for the man, but she was also sad. She knew that the high price of espinage was making it difficult for some people to afford it. She decided to do something about it. Sarah started a project to grow espinage in her community. She taught people how to grow espinage and how to cook it. She also helped people start their own businesses selling espinage. Sarah's project was a success. She helped to make espinage more affordable and accessible to everyone. She also helped to create a new market for espinage. Sarah's story is a reminder that one person can make a difference. She started with a small act of kindness and she ended up changing the world. And the next one, and then we're going to break this down a little bit. The next one, I asked it. This one is hilarious, and I did this with Apple here a while back. I asked it to write me a love story between the Hamburglar and Grievous. The Hamburglar and Grimace had been enemies for as long as anyone could remember. The Hamburglar was a notorious thief, always on the lookout for a tasty burger to steal. Grimace was a hulking purple creature with a taste for milkshakes. The two of them were always at each other's throats, but there was something about each other they couldn't deny. One day, the Hamburglar was caught in the act of stealing a burger from a McDonald's restaurant. Grimace was there to witness the crime. He was about to apprehend the Hamburglar when he stopped short. He realized that the Hamburglar was actually quite handsome in a mischievous sort of way. The Hamburglar was also surprised by Grimace's reaction. He'd always thought of Grimace as a rival, but now he saw him in a whole new light. The two of them locked eyes, and for a moment the world stood still. Then the Hamburglar smiled and said, I surrender. Grimace smiled back and said, I'm glad you're not going to resist. And so the Hamburglar and Grimace began a secret love affair. They met in secret away from the prying eyes of the other McDonald Land characters. They would steal away to secluded corners of the restaurant where they would kiss and cuddle and talk about their dreams for the future. One day, the Hamburglar and Grimace decided to run away together. They packed their bags and left McDonald Land in the middle of the night. They traveled to a faraway land where they started a new life together. They opened a restaurant where they served the best burgers and milkshakes in the world. The Hamburglar and Grimace lived happily ever after. They were finally free to be themselves, and they were finally able to love each other without fear of judgment. So that is just two stories of that I just thought was hilarious. And yeah, I hated it too. You weren't the only one that hated this. I hated it too. But the one commonality I notice in both stories is how basic the story is. Nothing's really flushed out. It just is a very basic cookie cutter. You would turn something like this in for a paper into school and get a credit for it, right? AI now, this is dumb. If it was really intricate, it would have gone into way different detail, way different plot synopses. But it just shows how basic it is to start. But what if that's just introducing humans to the artificial intelligence and not what really artificial intelligence is? Like I said, it could 100% be, look at those two goofballs in a story about the Hamburglar and Grimace and got the one guy to put shades on. These are just things that I think could be a possibility. I think AI in the future could be harmful, yes, but I don't think it's Skynet harmful where it's going to eradicate humans, but it may turn into a Logan's Run thing. Like humans aren't viable past this age. We're going to put and this is the thing that people don't understand. All AI would have to do is manipulate genetic code and not tell the whoever's controlling it and manipulate it just a little bit. People are dying at the age of 40. People are dying at the age of 30. So you're decreasing the population to a sizable amount. You're decreasing it to Georgia Guidestone's level, which we should get into another. Well, they're destroyed now. That somebody destroyed them for some weird
Yeah,
reason.
yeah. That's even more
Um,
important to have a show about that because that's got to preserve that a little bit.
yeah, no matter how you feel about how crazy the thing is,
Mm.
it's just something that has to be done. So I don't know. What do you think there, CH the sniper?
I think right now my initial like intro into the show is still pretty solid. I think right now what we consider to be AI is not really AI. It's kind of dumb. It's interesting. It's entertaining. It's doing things for us in some kind of way, but I don't think it's anywhere near problematic. But the potential is there.
I agree.
And I think the most problematic area is in the arts right now because that's the easiest area for manipulation by a computer program,
Yes,
and
and
and that's what we're seeing.
yeah, I have to agree. I think the arts is the entry point, and then like Ingrain Cyclist said, I think it goes from there, and then it continues on into manufacturing. Because art is, let's be honest here, art is the easiest way to get in. If you're going to do it, paint pictures, music, people, entertainment is really what it is. What
It's
if
culture.
what about when there's a movie that AI
Hmm.
creates with AI generated actors?
Hmm.
And I
It's
think
culture.
I think once you take the actors out of it, now here's another question for you. These AI generated actors, are they going to be in numerous movies? Frank Hillman, for example, who's not a real person, could be Frank Hillman, Jeff Tweedleton, Christina Allegorka. What if these are all people that are created by the AI? And if that happens, I'm suing because that's mine. I made those up. Copyright. But all these names, right? Those get created. And then what if they're like, man, we love these actors and actresses, but they're just a program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we could get into the adult aspect of all of this in terms of relationships, both, uh, marriage and then the sexual aspect, but that's probably for an Uncanny After Dark episode.
Mm.
But I mean, AI really has no boundaries where it could go. The leader of a country could be an artificial intelligence. What about that? What about President AI versus President AI 2? Then what?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that we're gonna have to be talking about. And it reminds me of Halo 5. To nerd out for a second, they had Governor Sloan, who was an AI program, who was a leader of a whole freaking planet. He was an AI.
Yeah.
And he was a leader. People, actually, human beings, looked up to this thing. So there's just stuff you got to think about. Don't get the rampancy. Anyways, that's it for us tonight. We are officially done. Not officially done with the show. You thought. Yeah, that's what you thought there, Hitman. How'd you get that name? Tell us how you got that name. Tell us.
I don't even know myself. It's a mystery.
You're gonna end up watching the show anyways. I mean, you guys
It's a
are.
mystery.
You guys always do, and then complain about us in some form or fashion on the internet. So, I mean, there's $11,000 dolls for that, but I don't think they really constitute as robots. They just constitute as dolls because they don't think, they don't feel. I'm not gonna. No, we're not doing that. I'm not because that could go off the rails real easy, real easy. Anyways, you guys, thanks for sticking with us. We love you guys. We appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks, unless we are AI generated, and that cuts us out of our uncanniness next week.